You won't see Cardinals prospect Quinn Mathews on the opening day roster after he was optioned to minor league camp on Sunday. Was this a surprising move, and what does it mean? Plus, a new injury reported for one Cardinals pitcher. What's going on, everyone, and welcome into this edition of B-Schaeff Daily. Brenden Schaeffer with you. It is Sunday evening, March 2nd, 2025. On today's show, we'll be talking about Quinn Mathews, the news that he was optioned to Cardinals minor league camp on Sunday, along with a number of others, as the Cardinals begin to trim down their roster toward opening day. This will happen a number of times. Camp cuts are nothing to be alarmed about, but we want to talk about Quinn Mathews being among that first group of Cardinals to be cut from big league camp, because it seemed like maybe he would get another opportunity or two to impress in Grapefruit League play, or just get an opportunity to show what he's capable of doing, because last year was a fairy tale season for him, moving all the way from low A up to triple A by the season's end. And you kind of thought, well, coming into spring camp, did he have an opportunity to prove himself and maybe earn strong consideration for an MLB debut sooner than later? Maybe he's a little bit further behind in the track than we had anticipated, or, well, we'll talk about that. We'll explain exactly whether we thought that this was a regular timing for him to be cut from big league camp or not. And then we'll update you on an injury to Zack Thompson, which is interesting because just the other day I was talking on Sports Hub STL, was asked about Zack Thompson and why it is that we just never really hear about him, and the conversation of all the young arms that are maybe competing for that starting depth chart, whether it's to be in the Memphis rotation or to try to crack the St. Louis rotation. Thompson has sort of been a forgotten name, and that's not going to change anytime soon with the update from him on Sunday, as he has a new injury, or at least new to us. And so we'll talk about that, what the timeline for him could be, and what that could mean for his future with the Cardinals. Before we jump right into talking about Quinn Matthews being cut from big league camp, I want to thank everybody for supporting the show, B-Schaeff Daily, throughout the spring. It's been a lot of fun bringing these episodes. We'll continue to do so, and just want to make a quick reminder, if you are interested in supporting the channel on the next level as I continue to provide coverage here on B-Schaeff Daily, check out the video description below, which contains the link to join the YouTube membership. There's a couple of tiers within that, and all of it helps to support the content made here on this channel and on the B-Schaeff Daily podcast page on Spotify, which you guys can also follow on Spotify if you would like to listen to your podcasts that way instead of on YouTube. Doesn't make any difference to me. All right, let's talk about Quinn Mathews. As I know, it's unfortunate because a lot of people are rightfully excited about the lanky left-hander who blazed through the Cardinals system in 2024 after he was drafted in the summer of 2023, and he has moved up prospect lists. He's arguably the Cardinals' top prospect this side of J.J. Weatherholt. I think he's blazed past Tink Hence, in my opinion, in terms of just his projectability for a big league debut sooner than later. Weatherholt is maybe the top prospect in the organization because of his draft capital, but Quinn Mathews is still even closer to a big league debut than I think JJ is. So this definitely is a big name in terms of the Cardinals farm system, and that's the first time I said the word farm. I want to bring back down on the farm. We got to do that again this season once the minors begin. But it's just one of those situations where I don't think the Cardinals were prioritizing any more innings than we saw from Quinn Mathews, because he is a little bit lower in the pecking order in terms of opening day, March 27th, 2025. What's this rotation going to look like? It was interesting to read some comments from Oliver Marmol that John Denton tweeted out a pretty complete quotation of, and so I want to read from that to kind of set the scene a little bit here for this conversation, because I'll admit, I was a little bit surprised by the early timing of it when I saw Derek Gould reporting this morning that Quinn Mathews was heading over to the minor league camp and that his time in the big league camp had concluded. I was like, okay, not like shocked, but a little bit surprised that he maybe didn't get a second chance, because a lot of times when you have starting pitchers that are on the cusp, you want to see him a couple times, right? And in the case of Quinn Mathews, though, I think we have to remember, like, this was really his first real glimpse at this type of environment, getting into a Grapefruit League game and being part of the big league camp the way that he was. Even though he was a guy that finished up at AAA last year, he had never thrown a professional inning before the beginning of 2024. So there's kind of a total run of the experience level and the emotions and everything that goes into that, and what you learn about it too. And that's kind of what Oliver Marmol's quote that I'm going to read here from John Denton focused in on a number of things that Quinn Matthews maybe learned from this experience that kind of continue to give you the belief that he's not very far off at all from making a big league debut. But the Cardinals are at a spot now where they're going to start to prioritize some different arms for those innings in Grapefruit League. Here is the quote from Ollie Marmol, courtesy of John Denton's Twitter account. You can follow John Denton, the Cardinal beat writer for MLB.com, at John Denton555 on Twitter. And here was the quote from Marmol. Quote, "He did a phenomenal job. Even his exit meeting to transition into minor league camp, it was awesome. Just the way he handled all of it, and you listen to him verbalize what he took out of camp from a routine standpoint. It's always good when these young guys can see it modeled here. Their immediate reaction is," and then he put in parentheses, "realizing there's another whole level to preparation that I need to tap into." And that's what he communicated, having a routine not only for a game, but for the way he prepares for playing catch and the way he prepares for his bullpen. That is exciting for everybody because he's already good. So to the point of the Cardinal manager, he's already really good, and this was a spring in which he sort of unlocked and recognized being in that environment, which this is something that I feel like goes without saying. It is kind of an unspoken thing, and yet you like to hear people talking about it, and you like to see it in action because it's a very real thing. It stands to reason that this would be the case, that these young players who, whether they're going through college baseball or even the minor leagues, no matter how many years they're down there, you kind of have to have that aha moment where you go, oh, it looks like this to truly prepare like a big leaguer. Like you've been riding on your talent or you've been riding on your ability for so long, and maybe you feel like you've got a routine and you do pretty well in the preparation areas, but then when you see like that big league camp is that opportunity to see a guy who's, maybe been in the league for a decade and you are, scratching the surface in your first big league camp of being around that environment. And you kind of get a sense for, oh, this is how Sonny Gray prepares. Like this is what that looks like. And Quinn Matthews had his locker right next to Sonny Gray in spring training, right? When he was in that big league clubhouse, he was somebody that the Cardinals intentionally put those two together in as many situations as they could to where he's able to kind of get an idea for what that looks like, right? And so for Ollie Marmol to say he's verbalizing basically the exact things that we were hoping to see him take away from this camp, his presence in this camp for as long as it may have been, long or short, we can decide whether or not he was there long enough. It seems as though the Cardinals are pretty satisfied with feeling like he took away from it what they were hoping to have him take away from it. Because as Ollie says in the end of the quote that I read there from John Denton, it's exciting for everybody because he's already really good, right? He's already a really good player, and now he's maybe going to take into this minor league season as he starts in presumably AAA. He's going to be able to take into that the notion of here's how I can take my preparation to the next level and rise to the standard of what a big league prep looks like and what it looks like in my in-between days when I'm throwing my bullpen session and the way that I want to prepare for that and prepare for playing catch and prepare for just everything is routine-oriented. This is a guy that definitely, I think, has a personality where he thinks about a lot of these things, and he's a very deep thinker of the game, and he is, has a strong desire to improve and get better. And so I wouldn't be surprised if Quinn Matthews learned some things from this camp that are going to allow him to do that. Now, just on the surface, this is not, in my opinion, and everybody can have their own thoughts about this, but this is not a case where it's like, oh, he didn't perform well enough, and so he's not ready for the big leagues, like we're sending him down because of something he did in camp. This is just, and it's so hard because the Cardinals have said, yeah, this is, the reset, the transition. It's going to be more of a youth movement, and all of these things I think are baked into every interaction that Cardinals fans, have right now about this team. Like I'm reading some of the comments here on the John Denton tweet. Someone said, John, am I missing something? Does performance no longer determine whether or not a player is ready for the bigs? Matthews has looked like our best pitcher the entire spring so far. Why is he being sent down? And it's like, that's probably not a very uncommon question. I feel like a lot of people feel this way. That being said, Quinn Matthews threw one game. Like, it's kind of hard to say he was their best pitcher. He threw one game, but that's the fault of the team, right? Like, they chose to have him throw one game. One game was enough, I think, for where Quinn Matthews is. Again, Quinn Matthews was not going to jump the line. He was not going to jump Michael McGreevy, and he was not going to jump Gordon Graceffo even. He was not going to jump a starter version of Matthew Liberatore. Like, the Cardinals are going to sort through some of those things. They're going to continue to prepare those guys for as long as they can, stretch them for as long as they can, because you have to be ready to change on a dime. If we, in a week and a half, have an injury to Michaelis or Matz or Sonny Gray or Palante or Eric Fetty, or Eric Fetty gets traded, or, any of those things happen, you have to have the next guy to be ready. And the Cardinals, I think, are in a very good spot this spring where they have Michael McGreevy to do exactly that. But what happens if the next guy is needed? You have to continue to string these guys along and bring them along. And so they're doing that with, I presume, Graceffo for a little while longer. And maybe he'll shift to the bullpen as they get closer and they're able to kind of pass that baton and say, okay, we're going to get there with our starting five or the six that we have ready just in case. We're going to be covered there. We can afford to start dialing guys like Graceffo if we want him in our bullpen, or Liberatore if we want him in our bullpen, into shorter burst type of guys. Quinn Matthews is going to go down to AAA. He's going to, I say AAA, it's minor league camp, but he's going to continue to stretch out as a starting pitcher because he's going to be in that Memphis rotation. This is going to actually give him the opportunity to continue to be waiting in the wings and be ready for if and when the Cardinals need him come the season. I don't think that's necessarily indicative of a March 27th because he's not on the Major League roster anymore. Like, that stands to reason that he's not going to make the team. But it's one of those things where there weren't going to be the innings to go around to prioritize the guys that are in the rotation and then the guys that are ahead in line of Quinn Matthews right now for a Major League spot. Because the depth chart is such that Quinn's just a little bit lower on it for the time being. That being said, I think when all the dust settles and you find out who your starting five is going to be and who your Memphis rotation is going to be, from that moment on, Quinn Matthews can be the next man up if his performance in AAA dictates it. But remember, he pitched really well in single A, in high A, in double A, and then he had 4 starts in AAA last year and had a 6.5 ERA. And we've seen 2 innings from him in big league camp where he looked good. 2 innings, scoreless, gave up 2 hits and a walk, but struck out 3. He was very solid. That being said, like the 6.5 ERA and the little bit of a sample we got from him in AAA last year, again, there just seems to be kind of this misunderstanding where, well, he's 24 years old. Let me compare him to all the major league pitchers who are 24 years old and say, oh, this is just the same old Cardinals, taking forever to bring up their prospects. Or worse yet, the opinion, and again, if this is your opinion, I'm not trying to rag on you. You're wrong, but I'm not trying to rag on you. Say, well, they're manipulating his service time. No, they're not. No, they're not. If they wanted to blatantly manipulate his service time, and that was all that this was, and he was clearly Major League ready in every regard, they wouldn't be sending him to minor league camp on the 2nd of March. They'd be continuing to build him up and then be like, at a little bit toward the end, he's got some more things to work on. Like, I think he's close, and yes, he is 24 years old because he spent a lot of time in college and he's built up. He throws more innings at this stage than a lot of guys who have only thrown one professional season would be able to produce. So he's very much in a spot to be able to contribute in 2025. I would almost be surprised if we don't see him at some point in 2025. But it's not wrong of the Cardinals to have these other guys who were there first, and you want to make sure you're not making the types of mistakes that have kind of littered throughout the Cardinals system in recent years. More on the position player side, but even on the pitcher side, you could say that they, had and look, they had in other cases they've had guys like Sandy Alcantara and Zach Gallen behind the Dakota Hudsons or Jack Flaherty's or whoever, Luke Weaver at the time, those guys. And so they trade some of the guys that they think are lower in the depth chart and prioritize the guys that are a little bit closer to big league level. That's kind of what happened with those trades, right? The Ozuna trade, I think he had guys like Flaherty, Hudson, Weaver a little bit closer, and so those guys were ahead in line. So the Cardinals traded some of the younger guys that maybe weren't quite as close to the top of that pecking order. And yeah, they probably regretted it because those guys are good. But nobody's talking about trading Quinn Matthews. They're talking about having him start at AAA at the beginning of his 2nd professional season. And by May, you might see him in the rotation. I'm not saying you will. I'm not saying you won't. It's just, it's okay that he is being sent down today. Did it surprise me? Sure. I thought he would maybe get one more look in spring. But I also don't have the access to their pitching plan to know, like, on this day, March the 3rd, this guy needs 3 innings, this guy needs 3 innings, this guy needs 2. Oh, yeah, we need our relievers to continue to get ramped up. There are only so many Grapefruit League games. And so this is just part of that process. I don't think it is an indication that we're not going to see Quinn Matthews sooner rather than later. I just think it's more of an indication on where the Cardinals are right now when it comes to just their pecking order when it comes to the depth chart for starting pitching. I don't think it's a problem at all that we see Quinn Matthews being sent. I think this was always probably the plan. They got his feet wet in big league camp. He learned what they wanted to see him learn from it. I think you'll see him sooner rather than later. But let me know your thoughts. Like, again, if you're of the mind that, well, this is just more proof of the Cardinals, just they told us that the young guys are going to get a chance, and you lack understanding about the depth chart and the way that this is going to function, in my opinion. And look, maybe the way that the Cardinals are doing it is wrong. But I don't think that it is in this case, because I have faith that Quinn Matthews is going to be very, very much in the mix when it comes time to get, like, just 6 weeks into the season. You're in mid-May, and he's had some time to incorporate some of these things that he learned in spring camp, and I think he's going to be very motivated to get to the big leagues as soon as humanly possible, based on all the stories we've heard about him from his contemporaries and fellow players and stuff. So I think it's going to be a very productive year for Quinn Matthews. Do I think that the fact that the Cardinals are optioning him among the first cuts? No, they're optioning him. They're optioned Cooper Jerpy, Alex Cornwell, Ian Bedell, Bailey Horn. A lot of those guys are AAA starters, right? Jerpy is somebody that, very well, I'd have to look and see exactly what his numbers were last year to determine. And the Cardinals, and one thing they need to do, they probably need to take the training wheels off of Jerpy. He's not pitched nearly enough innings, and it is weird. I don't really know why they've done that. Maybe at times he was injured last year, and I'm talking out of my butt because I don't know what I'm talking about. But he threw 52 innings. He needs to throw 100 innings this year. Like, you got to find a way to ramp that back up. I know he did have some injuries for sure, but like this stuff with pitch counts and stuff within games, like, time to ramp him up, because he's not going to be able to be in the AAA rotation to start the season, I wouldn't think. Jerpy is, he's going to be in that age 24 category as well here very soon. Mid-March turns 24. He only threw 14 innings at AA last year. Again, 15 starts. I think he had to have, I just forgot as I began talking about it that he was injured. But they have definitely brought him along very slowly, and we'll see if there's a way that they can get more durability from him this year. But he may have to, even though the numbers were good in the little bit of time he had at AA, you'll probably have to put Jerpy at AA to get to log some more innings. But a lot of those other guys, like Bedell, could be in the AAA rotation potentially, depending on where the Cardinals see him. Cornwell is probably more in that category of like AAA depth. If there are guys who are prospects that are kind of going to get the catering above him, Cornwell is not in the prospect category, but he'll go down there and eat innings if he has to. He'll be long relief if he has to. What was out of the bullpen, kind of that long relief category for Memphis when he pitched last year. I say not a prospect. Like, he's just not quite on that tier of some of these other names that I think are going to be prioritized when it comes to the rotation spots there in Memphis. But no, I don't think it's a problem that Quinn Matthews has been optioned at this point. But let me know if you disagree, and, we'll kind of go from there. Another area that could, maybe it provides a spot for Cooper Jerpy in that rotation, or for Cornwell or Ian Bedell or somebody else in that Memphis rotation, is the fact that Zack Thompson is on the mend, and it's the kind of injury that I don't know that the next update that comes is going to be like a real quick good one. Just a grade 1 lat strain, though, is the word from Cardinal reporters that are down there at camp. John Denton saw it from Derek Gould as well. 3 to 4 weeks, according to John Mozeliak. And, of course, he had a 9.5 ERA last year with the Cardinals in 5 games and only pitched 1 inning in spring, and he'll be shut down for 3 to 4 weeks. So, again, just a grade 1. So it is the case that he could potentially take these 3 or 4 weeks of not throwing and have that be healed up and be ready to go. But it's a long shot anyway for Zack Thompson, I think, coming off of the way last year went for him, with kind of having some mechanical issues that he was trying to work through. The way that Ollie Marmol described this spring, what they were looking for from him was consistency of velocity. And I think I remember noting on, and by that I mean pitch to pitch. You can't be 95 and then 90 and then later in the at-bat. Like, keeping that consistency pitch to pitch through an outing is a key, and that's probably a direct result of some of the mechanical struggles that he had. But I think I remember noting from when I was down in Jupiter, one of his live BP sessions on the backfields, Ollie Marmol talking with some of the hitters that he faced. I think it was Brendan Donovan and one of the other starters on the big league club for a while after facing Zack Thompson. And Thompson was out there on the mound with the iPads and everything with the coaches, kind of talking through things. Like, they were getting nitty gritty. Not that they don't do that with other pitchers, but I feel like they were really kind of trying to hone in on what it was that was going to work or make Zack Thompson tick, and what did he see and what did the batters see, and trying to figure out a way forward for him. So this injury comes at a really brutal time for Zack Thompson. Now, if it's something long range, the Cardinals the thing of it is they're going to need a 40-man roster spot for Nick Anderson if he ends up being healthy enough to join the team, because everybody else that's going to be on the opening man 26 is already on the 40-man for the most part. Like, I can't think of any examples off the top of my head of anybody. Like, Quinn Mathews is not making the team. We know that. And so really, I think it boils down to, if Nick Anderson's healthy enough to be on the team, he's going to have that $1.1 million salary if he's added to the opening day roster, but they got to put him on the 40-man first. And I believe as of now, it says the Cardinals currently have 39 major league roster players and 19 non-roster players in camp. But I don't know if that means if the 40-man is full or not. I thought it was, to where they're going to need a spot. But I guess if there's something obvious that I'm forgetting, maybe Zack Thompson is the answer. I don't know. Is he considered not in camp because he is injured at this point? But anyway, they're going to need a 40-man roster spot for Nick Anderson. That could come by putting somebody on the 60-day injured list that would take somebody off the 40-man spot, off of a 40-man spot, and kind of open that up for the time being. And if Zack Thompson's injured, like, I would think that might be the protocol the Cardinals would take if he's going to be a long-range injury in that regard, rather than like try to DFA him or somebody else. But yeah, it kind of feels like Thompson was already on a little bit of rocky footing, and this is just kind of delaying what was going to be a very important spring for him. Like, whether or not it was going to be successful, I wasn't making any proclamations, but I think it was pretty reasonable to say, after the way last year went for Thompson, it was, and he made a lot of changes in the offseason. He said moved to Florida so he could train outdoors throughout the winter, which was something new and something he thought would benefit him, and just trying to really take his career as seriously as possible, because he's kind of at a crossroads in a lot of ways. Former first-round pick, and last year was really his opportunity to stick and didn't make it happen, and dealt with some injuries last year. So it's unfortunate that coming into camp, a camp that was going to be so pivotal for him, where already the team is kind of like the premise, when I was talking with Joe Roderick about this on Card Sub 365 the other day for Sports Hub STL, he said that's a guy that we don't really talk about or hear about at all as we talk about all these young guys that are trying to vie for opportunity. We almost forget Zack Thompson exists. And it's like, yeah, it's not just like us in the public ether doing that. I kind of feel like that is reflective of where he is on the depth chart for the Cardinals at this point. Organizational depth chart is kind of like forgotten about him too. But this spring was going to be that opportunity to work his way back into it, and it wouldn't have taken much for a former first-round pick if he locks it back in. I think he would have returned right to about where he was last year, vying for that opportunity as the number 6 starter, which very quickly became number 5 when Sonny Gray had the hammy issue at the beginning of last season. So I thought, as much as I don't think he's in a lot of consideration right now with the team, it wouldn't be hard to get back to it if he just shines. But now he's not pitching for 3 and 4 weeks, so not really an opportunity to shine. So we will see where this saga goes from here. Hopefully that grade 1 strain ends up being, a very light issue for him, and he's able to rebound. But right now I would say, he would be the underdog story if he makes it back with the Cardinals this year, just because of the way things are trending. So not counting him out by any means, but certainly there will have to be the point where he's back to health, and then the Cardinals make the decision to say, yeah, we're going to prioritize a AAA rotation spot for Zack Thompson in order to get him back. Like, they're gonna have some other prospects that are at that level, and do they prioritize Thompson with that spot when the time comes? Because I think this was going to be the spring where it's like, if it looks good, we're keeping him around, but if not, he might be one of those guys that you think about when it comes to a 40-man spot. So the fact that it's injury that's sort of delaying that opportunity to see what he's made of, I don't know how the Cardinals are going to react or respond to that. But I thought this was a pivotal spring for him, and now it's just going to be, he's going to be graded as an incomplete, is the way that it seems like it's going to be going. So that's the update on a couple of guys that are kind of on that AAA track, and maybe that ends up being where Thompson ends up when he gets an opportunity to pitch again and he's healthy. Quinn Matthews, I think, is going to be there and maybe the number 1 starter in that Memphis rotation. But he was optioned from camp, and people have thoughts on that, and that's fine. But as much as it was surprising to me, I'm not going to lie to you and say, I wasn't surprised at all. As you think about it, you don't think it's earth-shattering. It's one of those that's like, all right, this is just the trajectory they're going. I could count a bunch of other guys that are vying for those opening day roster spots and in the opening day rotation. And I think once they make a decision about Graceffo and Liberatore in particular, and even like Steven Matz, making sure he's still in the rotation, not for the bullpen track, once they make decisions about those guys, hopefully those decisions kind of stick, and then you'll see what the starting depth looks like. Because in past years, it was like Thompson comes in and he's a reliever, but then they need him to start midseason and it doesn't go well. Palante's a reliever and they're going to send him down, and now he's a starter and it's going to be great because he's in your rotation. And that sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't. Palante's case, it obviously did work out. It was exactly what he needed to revamp his career. But in the case of Thompson, we would say it probably hasn't worked out. And Liberatore goes back and forth every year of he's a starter, he's a reliever. It depends on what week it is. And so maybe this is the year where they have enough depth below to where they don't have to do that. They're like, Graceffo can be a big league reliever. Liberatore can be a big league reliever. And then number 6, 7, 8 on the depth chart as starters are McGreevy and, if it's Quinn Matthews or whoever else it might be. Off the top of my head, I'm struggling to, because again, it is a little bit of a brain buster that Quinn would be, okay, if he's so high on the depth chart and I would list him 7th, well, why is it that he's not still on the roster? But that's my point, is like they're still kind of figuring it out with Liberatore and Graceffo. I think those are the two names that stand out in a major way. And like I didn't include Tink Hence there because I feel like Tink Hence is certainly going to be starting at the minors. He was a Double-A, and maybe he gets to upgrade to the Triple-A rotation this year. Kyle Leahy is kind of part of that where they're stretching him out, but I think that's more for a long relief track than for starting. But once they make a decision, Tekoa Roby, that's the other name that legitimately could be maybe a touch ahead of Quinn Matthews just in terms of experience and minor league experience. But at the same time, Roby has not nearly the durability of Matthews and the innings logged. So if it's a case where Roby's going to, like, let's say Roby just shines and they're putting him in the rotation because they trade Fetty and Michaelis gets hurt. I'm just giving examples. And they need a guy. Roby right now looks really good. I don't think he's going to be on the opening day rotation, but he's another one of those guys that's in the Graceffo Liberatore category where I could see those guys starting in St. Louis in the bullpen if the Cardinals decide to go that route. And really, Roddery Munoz is kind of also in that category, former minor league starter. Feel like he makes more sense as a reliever to kind of just simplify things for him. But once the Cardinals decide on that group of players, the ones that are chosen as relievers ideally will stay as relievers, and that's going to be their ticket to stay in St. Louis as long as possible this summer. But then that can kind of thin out the depth chart behind. And if the Cardinals are confident that a McGreevy as your 6 and a Quinn Matthews as your 7 and a Roby as your 8th and, whatever, if the Cardinals have confidence that those guys can do the job if an injury should happen, they don't necessarily have to keep going back and forth with the Liberatores and the Graceffos. And like, if they choose bullpen for those guys, they can stay bullpen in theory. Then again, if all of them are kind of in that long relief bucket, the Cardinals might try to thread that needle and toe the line and say, let's get through April, keep these guys semi-stretched out so that if there's an injury, well, Graceffo was throwing 4 innings anyway, we can just have him slide into the rotation without really missing a beat. And they may feel compelled to do that if they don't think the readiness of like a Quinn Matthews or a Tekoa Roby is quite there. And in the case of a Roby, if he's ready, I think he'll have an innings limit for sure. But again, I think this is all very much in the hypothetical sphere of just kind of like mapping out what's that depth chart going to be organizationally. Because whoever they choose to be the relievers could impact how quickly a guy like Quinn Matthews moves up. If they want to stock Graceffo in the AAA rotation and Liberatore in the AAA rotation, which I don't think that would happen, where both of them would be down there along with Quinn, along with Tink, along with, maybe Ian Bedell or whoever else at this point. I don't think that would happen, but there would be enough. Like, what if Roddery Munoz made the roster as a reliever? Or if it was Ludus? I mean, you could find 8 relievers between Fernandez, Helsley, John King, Leahy, Ludus, O'Brien, Jojo Romero. I mean, that would be, I was just going through the 40-man roster. That would be 8. And Roycroft could be in there. So you could do that if you wanted to. I think the better version of the bullpen would have Liberatore and maybe even Graceffo also in it. But it's going to depend on how comfortable I think the team is with, do we go 5 deep or do we go 6 deep, 7 deep, 8 deep with guys that we feel could be legitimate big league options? That's a really fascinating conversation. And I think we kind of nailed the names that are involved in it. It's Roby. Maybe to a lesser degree. I would start with Libby and then Graceffo and then Roby. Any of them can kind of be starters or relievers. Any of them could make the team. I don't think Roby will make the team. I think it's going to end up being that when he's optioned, we'll go, oh, he wasn't as close as we thought he was. Kind of like with Quinn Matthews. And in Roby's case, it's more of like probably just an innings thing where you got to get him some professional innings under his belt before you maybe thrust him into the big leagues. But if he continues to look good and healthy, you never know. They could surprise us with what they provide for him as an opportunity. But I don't know. I think this is a really fun conversation because there are a lot of machinations, a lot of different ways that it could go. One or two guys turning from starters to relievers suddenly has Quinn Matthews in a more prominent spot. If he's 7th on the list and you have 5 starters, it wouldn't take much for him to have a really good April, and the Cardinals go, okay, that 7th is now kind of written in pen rather than pencil, where if we had to call upon somebody, we can call upon him rather than try to convert our Libertor from the 7th inning man back into a starter and mess with him some more. Like we'll have some faith in what the progress looks like for Quinn Matthews, stuff like that. So I think that's where it is. We'll see where it's heading from here. A lot of different directions this thing could still go, but that's the update. Quinn down to the minor league camp. Jerpy was as well, and Zack Thompson. He'll be out for a while and hopefully can recover from that and find his way back toward a spring that was going to be productive for him until the injury, or he was hoping would be productive. They were going to productive in some way, right? They're going to find out something about is he that guy or is he not that guy? And now it's still kind of TBD. But that's going to do it for this edition of B-Schaeff Daily. Thank you guys so much for listening and for supporting. If you're listening to this really early on Monday morning, check out the Randy Carricker show featuring Brooke Grimsley on Sports Hub STL. I'll be playing the part of Randy Carricker tomorrow, and so Brooke and I will bring you the show along with Matt Rocchio, and that'll be fun, talking about all the St. Louis sports happenings from over the weekend, including a Mizzou loss that, I'm still not really over it. So anyway, listen to that at 10 a.m. on Monday on the Sports Hub STL channel if you want. And if this has already been 10 a.m. and you've already missed the live show, well, go back and listen to that or watch that next because it's all recorded there on YouTube. Okay, I've talked for long enough. Thank you guys so much, and we'll talk to you next time on B-Schaeff Daily. Peace.